clicking on the link in the chat. I just put it in there right now, and making a donation to CLAGS this afternoon. Your gift affords our community and scholars the opportunity of a one-of-a-kind experience that celebrates scholarship, art, and activism from the voices of the LGBTQ community. So whether your gift is $10 or $100 or $1,000, it has significant impact on the lives of students and our community, both now and in the future. So again, I invite you to click the link in the chat and donate to CLAGS, and we will be popping that link in there periodically throughout our program. So thanks again for everyone who's here, and I'm going to turn it back to Yasmina.
Hello. Thank you, Laura. And I think I have figured out how to stream this, so now it's streaming on YouTube. So I do want to make sure, since we have our ASL interpreters, that they are visible to anybody who is viewing. I just want to make sure that people who are watching can actually see. Okay, so I'm just going to start by saying a few words about Trans Day of Visibility. The Trans Day of Visibility was inspired, created by Rachel Crandall Crocker in 2009, who wanted to see a day where trans people are celebrated, and this is just a day for us to experience joy. And it is somewhat different than the Trans Day of Remembrance, which is looking at people that we have lost. So I hope we all can share some joy today. And we are going to start with talking about our panelists. So the panelists we have today: Janice Stacy, who is Dakota and Cherokee, and who is an activist, who is a Dakota and Cherokee descendant, and is a trans-identified Two-Spirit woman who helped with planning the Queer March in 21-22, is helping the one in 23, is on the board of Indigenous Peoples Day Philly, and helps plan Philly Day March events. Janice currently works to foster fair housing, including LGBTQI2S+ people. She's also a guest lecturer at various universities for trans and Two-Spirit cultural training. She has she had distinguished career as an electronic engineer. She was.
You had a good time. If you're balance.
Can we?
Parents needs to you. You need to have called your bank. Excuse me. I would fraudulent activity account. Look at your cash and say, "Wow, yesterday I got."
So we are not sure what's happening, but we're going to ask that people stay muted. There will be a point where we're going to invite people to share and talk, but just so we can get through the introductions. So Janice was the co-chair of Philadelphia Trans Wellness Conference for 5 conferences, worked for 11 years with the planning committee. Janice is a co-founder of the East Coast Two-Spirit Society, co-founder of National Center for Transgender Equality, and is an electronic engineer with extensive project management experience. She has also spent significant time on workplace issues, transgender insurance coverage, workplace inclusion, racial equality, gender equality, and housing for low-income and homeless trans people. She has also given classes on Two-Spirit and transgender.
Oh, Jasmine, I think you went on mute.
Okay. So I don't know when have I gone on mute, but I'm going to continue. Sid is a TV writer and producer, dancer, archivist, and journalist, and whose work on the ballroom community has been published in the New York Times, Vice, and Them. He's a proud member of the House of Extravaganza and was co-executive producer on HBO Max competition show Legendary Seasons 1 and 2. He worked as a staff member on HBO The Vanishing Health under Jeremy O. Harris and Aziza Barnes, and he was a staff writer position on the CW's Tom Swift. After living in Berlin, Paris, London, and New York for 5 years, Sydney is excited to share his story of transition in a memoir history hybrid book, Undeniable, a history of voguing, ballroom, and how it changed my life. He's writing about New York City's ballroom history and his own history within it. His accolades include being the recipient of the Martin Duberman Award at the New York Public Library and being listed on Condé Nast Now List 2020 on them. He was 2020 Artist in Residence at Laundromat Project, 2020 Sokol of Arts Fellow, and in 2019, he made a history as the first transgender man to win a voguing category at the biggest ball in New York City. 21, he made history as the first Black transgender man in the Writers Guild of America. I do want to say I'm also honored to have had a chance to work with Sid at CLAGS. So, Shara
My most
Ivory.
important accolade, Yasmina, you
Oh.
forgot.
What did I forget?
Yes, was working with you and the class
Oh, yeah.
team. It's a homecoming. I just wanted to add that.
Yes.
I'm grateful to be here. Thank you.
Shiar is a Black and Indigenous, non-binary, trans femme creative visionary, published researcher, and social justice advocate. Since the age of 13, Cher has been a leading voice of youth activism and has become one of the most political influential youth leaders in America. They've previously served President Biden as 2018 Biden Fellow for LGBTQ equality at the Biden Foundation in Washington, D.C., and advocated for equitable New York City. Sorry. Equitable New York City. They're credited for co-founding the nation's first and only trans wellness center in Los Angeles, California, through a $1 million annual grant awarded by Los Angeles County Department of Public Health, successfully lobbying for the repeal of the walking while trans ban in California, in New York, advocating for the passage of New York State Raise the Age for Homeless Youth Act, and for contributing to a national PREA resource center policy for TGNC young people in juvenile detention. Prior to joining the New Pride Agenda in 2022 as the New York City community organizer, they were a policy associate and organizer at the ACLU and continued to serve on the New York City Task Force on issues impacting TGNC and BI people in custody. Okay. And the next panelist is Mateo Guerrero Taberas, who is the Trans Justice and Leadership Program Manager at Make the Road NY, where he runs the Leadership School program, develops movement, curriculum for liberation, and supports organizing spaces for the TG and CIQ community in Jackson Heights and Bushwick. Since migrating to the United States, Mateo has come out and embraced his identities as a transgender man of color and queer immigrant. Mateo organizes at the intersection of ending criminalization and detention for immigrant communities, people who are in the sex trades, and TGNCIQ communities of color. Jennifer Love Williams is a formerly incarcerated Black trans woman, an entertainer, and an activist. She is the foundress of the Jen Love Project and serves as a co-chair of the formerly incarcerated subgroup of the National LGBT HIV Criminal Justice Working Group. Ms. Love is an organizer with Black and Pink New York City chapter. Jen is the head of the Advisory Council for Black and Pink Massachusetts. She also does work with the National Council for Incarcerated and Formerly Incarcerated Women and Girls. She's on the board. She's a board member of Garden State Rainbow Sports. And this is me. I'm not going to talk too much about myself. I'm just going to say that I am proudly binary and queer, non-binary and queer, and I'm originally from former Yugoslavia. And I have a show coming up at the end of May and June that I'm working with some people from Wow Cafe Theater. I am CLAGS Director of Finance and Development. I also teach at City College. So I'm going to stop sharing so that we can actually see some of our so we can see some of our panelists, and we can share a little and hear from the panelists, because that's what we all have come to see. So today is the Trans Day of Visibility. So my first question for the panelists is, why do you think visibility is important, and or do you think it's important, and if you do, why is this important to you? And I said at the beginning, before we all joined here, to my panelists that they're welcome to skip any questions that are not interesting to them. So I'm going to start with Janice. But then again, everybody else feel free to jump in, or you know, not jump in. Janice, I can't hear you.
Maybe click the settings on your Zoom, maybe the audio, the microphone, whatever isn't being picked up.
So I'm going to say, does anybody else want to jump on this question while Janice is sorting the Sid, go ahead.
Yes, I would love to. First of all, I'm just so grateful to be here again. So grateful for the space that you're all making on this conversation. As Yasmina knows, I was like hustling to get to the CLAGS office. I just came from Jersey City. They were doing a dedication ceremony for my sister, our trans sister, Venus Extravaganza, or shall I say Venus Paligati Extravaganza. There's a documentary being made at the moment, and not only was the state of New Jersey, but also the city of Jersey City were honoring Venus, particularly the home that she grew up in, which is in Paris is Burning, where she does her interview, is now a cultural landmark in the state of New Jersey. And as part of the ceremony, what was beautiful is you had her brothers, you had other family members, and of course us, her chosen family, who knew her. And what I thought about, one of the speakers today mentioned that she was only 23. So if you saw Paris is Burning, she was 23, and unfortunately, her life was taken from her. But what amazes me is that she's had such an enormous impact. I've traveled the world doing things with ballroom, voguing, panel discussions. I worked on, an incredibly successful television show on HBO Max, and it's because of the visibility of so many trans people that not only have I been able to have, the life that I have, the career that I have, but that so many people have been able to see versions of themselves and know that a life of joy, of choosing yourself, of being with your friends, and just existing in the world is possible. So I definitely want to bring in the trans sisters, especially of the ballroom community, the femme queens who created ballroom and voguing. People like Doreen Corey and Avis Pendarvis, and the Butch Queens Up in Drag, like Pepper LaBeija and Paris Dupree, as well as transgender icon Mother Angie Extravaganza. It's because of not only their hard work, but also their visibility and their unapologetic attitude and way of being that made it possible. And then again, so many transgender men, Black transgender men within the community who've made my life possible, like Shady Prada, Sean Coleman Ebony, Javon Martin, Marquise Balenciaga, Duchess Ebony, and so many, many more. So it matters. It matters that we're here. This is a civil rights issue of our time, and it's important for us to be visible and to show up, because it shows other people that a better life is possible.
Thank you, Sid. Janice, are you want to try again?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. What I said before was unpaid the last day. Wanted to welcome everybody here and say thank you to Jay-Z and CLAGS for inviting us all. And to everybody that's here, welcome. So the question was, I was dealing with my headset. I forgot the question. What was the question, Jay?
Let me reread the question. So the question is, today is the Trans Day of Visibility. Do you think being visible is important to, and is it important to you? And do you think it is important? And I guess if it is, why is it important to you personally or globally?
Right. Okay. Trans Day of Visibility is very important. I've been around a long time. My first march was in 1973. We don't, if we're not visible, people don't know we exist because we don't look, you know, we don't necessarily stand out when we walk down the street. If we don't stand up and say that we're here, people don't know that we're here. So being able to be visible, I think, on this Trans Day of Visibility is telling the world that we're here and you already know us. So the more they know us, the less mystery there will be and hopefully less trouble for us to exist here.
Thank you, Janice. Did any of the other panelists wanted to add to this idea of basically why visibility and why does it matter or not?
I'd like to answer.
Go ahead, Jennifer.
The reason why this day, I'm sorry, I'm just turning my camera on, sorry. Bear with me, guys, I'm at work. Why this day is important? This day is important. As a Black trans woman, I had to learn that it's not okay for me just to be visible during Black History Month, as it's not just important for me to be visible on Trans Day of Visibility. We've always been here. We've been at night. We were blessed to feel less than. And truth of the matter is, like I said, we've always been here. We are teachers, we are doctors, we are lawyers, we are nurses. We are caretakers, we are providers. And right now, in 2023, what we do know is that it seems like the world is, for the word, use the word, the term that's recently been used is they want to eradicate us, right? And that's not okay. For myself, I work hard. I work hard every day of my life. These past like 3 or 4 years has been like dog years. I'm taking care of other people. Because that's what I'm here to do. And I have the world telling me that I can't exist. I have to be gone. And I've always been here. I've always been me. I'm not here because it's a fad. People before me are not here because it's a fad. There are some amazing people that are some often trans folks who went through hell for me to be present where I am currently. And for that, I'm always thankful. And I always want to pay it forward and make sure I do what I have to do to make sure that not only do I get to walk free in this world as I deserve to, but the people that come after me to make sure that they are given that same right, if not more, to walk around freely and comfortably. And that goes for a conformed trans person and a non-conforming trans person. We deserve to be here like we've always been here. And it's not okay for anyone to tell us we can't be here. And we have to stay present. I post because I want other trans folks to see, yeah, we out here, we doing things. I'm out here enjoying life and no one is gonna take that from me. This journey of my transition, it has not been easy. But standing here at 46, which is 16 years past the expectancy of a Black trans woman, I feel amazing. And I want the younger ones after me to live your life, be authentically you. No one can tell you otherwise, even though they will. You know what's inside yourself, that you deserve to be here, and I need you to live. That's visibility 365 and on leap year 366.
Thank you, Jennifer. And thank you, Jennifer, for checking in from work. And I also wanted to say that I really appreciate, I know today of all the days, but any day, so many of our panelists and so many of us have so many different places we need to be and we're needed. And so I really appreciate everybody taking time to share with us today. Did Matteo and Shar, do you want to jump in, or would you rather we move on? Okay. So
Again,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
yeah, I can go ahead. So, okay. I was thinking there's many aspects of visibility that come to mind, but when I was younger, this was 2010, 2011, I came to Make the Road, and there was a group of young folks who were chanting undocumented and unafraid. At the time, I was undocumented. I had recently moved from Colombia. I didn't have a status. And I remember kind of like freaking out that like, well, we're saying this out loud. We don't know who's around. People are gonna know we're undocumented. What is that gonna result for me? But that moment was particularly important for me because it was the first time I actually ended up feeling comfortable sharing with people that I was undocumented. And that was the first time I saw people with my identity feeling proud, feeling ready to organize, feeling energized. And I carry that memory with me now, as now I have transitioned and well, still continue to be at Make the Road. And is like, how are we building, how can we leverage visibility to build community power? And how can we leverage visibility to ensure that folks are feeling held, loved, appreciated, and have connections? Now, as a trans man, I think visibility means different things in different places, and positionality is important for me. In a space, so I primarily organize with trans women who are migrants, who have been at the interaction with the criminal legal system or have been detained. Primarily folks who are in the sex work, in the sex work industry, folks who have had experiences that I have not had. When I think about visibility and my role as a trans man in the space, I think about how can I utilize my privilege as a trans man to build the structures and create the structures to leverage their visibility, for them to be recognized for the work that they have been doing for decades. Because the reality is that we live in a very patriarchal society where, as trans men, oftentimes we get to be seen a lot sooner than the trans women that have been organizing for 30 years. And I think for me as a trans man, it is my responsibility to not replicate those same conditions. And to, you know, like if I have to do things behind the scenes, I will 100% do it and make sure that trans women, non-binary folks that have been building this path actually get the light, the flowers, and the love that they deserve. And that is in the space of community organizing. Now, I will confess there are other spaces where I think differently about visibility. I'm a climber. Love rocks. If I ever say to you, you rock, that means I'm giving you a huge compliment because I love rock. So in the climbing world, there are not, first of all, there are not many Black and brown people who climb, right? It's a very inaccessible sport. It's expensive. It requires like passed down guidance that where only white people have had access to. And so it is hard to climb as someone who is brown, who's a migrant. Now, even less trans Black and brown climbers. So when I'm in those spaces, I make sure I say very loudly, I am a trans man. I am a proud trans migrant. because it means differently in that space, because in that space, trans folks haven't even existed to even take that light. So I think for me, really, it's a matter of positionality. It's a matter of like, am I building the space for people to get the light, or am I creating the path for others to come in? So I think it really depends. I have a lot of thoughts, but yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. And thank you for bringing up the importance of the spaces and how different spaces do impact whether it is more or less important to sort of publicly announce oneself. And it's interesting for me, I'm an educator, I teach at City College, and I often feel that in that space, especially in some of the larger classes, I feel very important to announce and tell people I'm a non-binary person, because I feel like it's important for students to have that experience of just saying, okay, there are some of us who are educators and who are there. Where I may feel less the need in some other spaces to sort of like repeatedly announce. Yeah.
Oh, and the last thing, and I think, yeah, that's a very good example, right? Like I teach Spanish for lawyers at NYU, and in the very first class, I say like I am a trans man, and what this class is all going to be about is we're going to learn about language, but we're going to learn about language that is grounded in cultural competency. So expect that this class is probably going to be pushing you and the way that you think about gender and the way that you think about language in a way that you might not experience in any other Spanish class. Because yeah, our identities influence a lot how we do the work. And I think it helps people to see that we're able to exist and move in the world. Yeah.
Thank you. Go ahead.
I'll speak up and respond to this question as well. First and foremost, thank you for the invitation. It's such an honor to be here on this day with an incredible group of people. Matteo and I work very closely together. And Janice, it was a pleasure meeting you just recently, and so good to meet some other friends and family members as well. Happy Trans Day of Visibility. I'm sure for many of us, it's been a really difficult week. It's been a really hard year. And I really want to take stock of, in my response to this question, about what I don't think visibility isn't, what I think visibility isn't. I really firmly believe that visibility doesn't equate to equity. All across the country, our rights are being taken away and stripped away from us. Our lives are on the line, and yet trans people, non-binary people, gender non-conforming and gender expansive people are more visible than we ever have been before. And so my question is, what good is visibility if it doesn't come with increased protections, if it doesn't come with human rights and civil liberties, if it doesn't come with a lived experience of equitable gains and the ability to survive? I really think that that visibility has been reduced to who has a bigger social media following, who gets more likes, who gets to benefit from bigger platforms and more clout. And with all due respect, when I think of who's visible in our community, I think about people on shows like Legendary. I think about folks who are writing books and are going on speaking tours and have brand endorsements and are becoming models. I think that that's all great and fine, but I don't see those platforms being used to advance equity. I don't see those platforms being used to spread mutual aid requests of people who are poor, who are lower income, who are working class, who are at risk of being evicted, who are being discriminated against in the workplace, who are being fired for being trans. And so I really think of today and visibility in general as a call to action to people within our community who do have the privilege of being visible, We have to recognize that visibility, when it comes with a platform, when it comes with a following, when it comes with hundreds of thousands, if not millions of likes on social media, it comes with a responsibility to pass your platform on to people who are everyday, ordinary folks who are in the struggle, and even more so, folks who are leading change work. Because writing a book, selling tickets, getting a paycheck for being a brand ambassador is not creating change for everyday, working class, poor people who are homeless, who have no other option but to engage in survival sex work, who are being incarcerated because of survival crimes. We have to give visibility to everyday, ordinary people in our community who are suffering the most, because our lives, our stories are valuable and they deserve to be visible too. They deserve to be uplifted. They deserve to have a platform. They deserve the same level of support and recognition. Thank you.
Thank you. So I just wanted to give a chance if anybody wanted to sort of respond or take on or add, or we can just move to the next question. Okay, go ahead, Say.
I would like to add to that because I really appreciate all of these words. I think that it's a very important that we not forget that visibility needs to also come with some teeth, right? That in LGBTQ, the T is never silent. And I think what's important when I think about visibility with all these questions, it's about remembering that this is the beginning. Usually, I feel like visibility is always usually the first thing, right? We see when we open our eyes, and when you see a version of yourself that's possible, that's usually the start. And I would like to really bring into this space the idea of yes and, which is something that I have had to really, really learn in a writer's room, which is when somebody pitches an idea that you build on that idea. And to me, what Trans Day of Visibility offers is a beginning of sight, of seeing each other in our joy and in our celebration. And then on top of that, understanding that with our faculties, with our access, our levels of privilege and power, and we know we have so much power, which is obviously why there's so many people, unfortunately, in this country and around the world who are trying to deny us of that power. That is also up to us to change, completely realter these institutions, whether they be in media or in academia or on the street or in our day-to-day lives, or even just within ourselves. So I would just like to also offer for this space just an understanding that we don't have to say either or with the way that we're showing up in our activism and in the way that we're being visible, but rather that we should really understand and acknowledge that everybody's kind of entering this at all angles because we all need to like join this fight. To me, it was very, very real for me, I think, when, again, today, Venus's brothers were speaking, and these are like older, cis, straight guys from New Jersey who were just expressing their love, not only for their sister, but for our community and even for the house. And just to see that, oh, wow, you know, this is what real allyship can be when we activate people, when we use our positions and our platforms to get people who otherwise would never be on board necessarily with us. But that it's about building collective power and collective action, and that we have to do it from all angles. So thank you so much.
Thank you. So one of the questions, and I'm going to ask Jennifer if you're near your camera to start us off on this, which is there something you can say that will help others better understand you and your journey as a person of trans experience?
I'm happy that you asked that question. I know for me, I'm growing my social media following. And one of the things that I keep seeing on TikTok and on Instagram is a great amount of hate, so to speak. Because cisgender women, for some apparent reason, and sadly, some cisgender gay men are all on this impression that trans women, I'm only speaking for trans women because that's what I am, we, for some reason, are trying to erase the cis woman. And that's not the case. Understand, for anyone who feels that way, a cis woman isn't even born a woman, she's born a female. So me identifying as a trans woman, as an adult trans woman, is not erasing your mothers, your aunts, or even you, if that's you. Understand, my journey as me, as a great human, as a Black human, as a Black woman who happens to be trans, is not erasing anyone. People are so focused on making me unhappy. And I say it that way because people are so
Jennifer, you muted yourself, sorry.
Was I muted all the time?
No,
Oh,
just
okay.
the last sentence.
Yeah, come on. Sorry about that. People are so invested in telling me why I shouldn't be allowed to be me. People are so quick to see and tell me that, oh, you're not a woman because you can't give kids. And my son shouldn't be with you because you can't give him kids, and I want grandchildren. So now you're telling me that I can't be a woman, even though trans experience, because I can't bear children. Do you understand how demeaning that is? Not even to me, you saying that, you're telling the millions of cisgender women who can't bear children. They're less than as well. Use your start to think. People are so quick to throw all these daggers to remind me that I'm not a woman. Sweetheart, you're not changing my thoughts. I started this journey of me becoming the woman that I am. Because I don't really go around saying I'm a trans woman. I go around saying I'm a woman. I've earned that. No one had to give me that. I was a woman before I had a name change. I was a woman before identifications got changed. I'm a woman phenomenally. That's me, Jennifer Love. I'm a woman, okay? And you and no one else is ever going to make me feel less than. And once again, to any cisgender woman, I hope I'm making sense to you guys, because in my mind I am. To any cisgender woman who identifies as a woman, who feels threatened by me or any other trans person, sweetheart, stop focusing on the differences that you and I have and focus on what we have in common. Because bodily autonomy that's being taken and controlled, that affects you and me. For those of you guys who are Black and or of color, stop focusing on what's different between you and I. Understand voter rights suppression is affecting you and I both. The so-called criminal justice system, AKA modern day slavery, everybody in there looks like me. Well, not everybody, but majority look like me, okay? For women in general, understand 60 years ago, 70 years ago, they controlled you. So don't sit here and be so quick to jump on the bandwagon. Oh, a trans woman can never be me. You're trying to be me. No, I'm not. I've had some amazing females in my life. I've had some amazing females on television growing up. All of these females inspired me to become the great woman that I am, that happens to be a trans experience. Don't take away from me, because I'm not taking away from you. Let's come together. Every marginalized group actually should be joining together so we can all get respectfully what we need to survive as decent humans. Okay? I can go on a long tangent, but I'm gonna let my other panelists take it from here.
Thank you, Jennifer.
You better work, Jennifer. You better work. You better say all that. I just wanted to affirm, please. And thank you.
Thank you. Did anybody else want to take the question? The question is, what can you say to better help others understand you and your journey as a person of trans experience? And it's okay if if we feel that Jennifer said. Janice, go ahead.
What Jennifer said is hard to follow, right? Because she's speaking the truth, right? But we've been around for a long time. All of us, all trans people have been around for a very long time. I'm Native, so we didn't call ourselves trans. We predate the modern civil rights movement in that regard. We were around in the 1800s and the 1700s. Here in the United States, what we call the United States, Turtle Island. We've been here since the first white person landed on the shore, and persecuted as we went along, right? Some years are good, some years are bad. We start fighting. Now, the more modern civil rights movement that started in Stonewall or started in Compton's cafeteria in California, or back into the 50s where some people were coming out with societies, the Janus Society and different societies, have gotten us to where we are. So we're being attacked, right? This wasn't something I didn't expect to come, right? Used to be that we were attacked at the local level by everybody because nobody knew we existed. And if they saw one of us, they thought they could eradicate the entire group of trans people by seeing one of us, just getting rid of one of us. Then they started seeing groups of us, right? So, the first march I went to, we were throwing eggs and rocks at us, and they wanted us to, it was small in Chicago. They were getting eggs and rocks thrown at us, and everybody is afraid because we could get arrested for being dressed in the wrong kind of clothes. We got that fight coming again. I didn't expect that clothing would be coming back as a fight, but it is, all right? So they're legislating what clothing people can wear in places like Tennessee, trying to implement it across the gender stereotype. That's first hitting, I think, drag queens. That's going to hit everybody, right? It doesn't stop there, right? It goes to making every woman in the United States wear a dress and every guy wear pants, and anybody who's not doing those two things is breaking the gender stereotypes that they're making into laws in states like Tennessee. We fought that before, we could fight it again. We just have to be unified to do it, all right? We put an effort in the 70s. We kept getting thrown under the bus, but we always get thrown under the bus. And HIV hit the community real hard, so a lot of things stopped. We're growing again. Now we're being attacked at the national level instead of just on the local community level. This is a fight we knew was coming, and we need to pull together to fight that fight as it comes together. I'm going to echo what Jennifer said. We need to pull together. Not everybody can be out. Not everybody has, right? Some people are not best situated to be out and proud and in front of things, all right? Those of us that can be, we need to be able to fight for those of us that can't be. Those of us with privileges to pass need to understand that when we stand up, we need to stand up for those privileges, for those people who cannot pass, right? We don't start fighting together, we're gonna be in trouble, right? We're a little divided right now as a community. So I come on something like this in order to be able to say we can pull together. I'm Native, we've been around a long time. Two-Spirit, historically in my society, we just transition genders and we call ourselves male or female and we're done. I made a point of it to say that I'm a trans woman because I think it's important for people to see us all year round and get used to the idea. So I can take the hits at my age that younger people can't. All right, I've been through a lot of things to get here, so that's part of what this day is about to me. So, thanks.
Thank you, Janice. So we have some questions from the audience, and I did want to share them because while I did have a bunch of questions, I also want to make sure that we're hearing, and I feel like the conversation is going in more interesting directions actually than what I prepared as questions. So, so one question was about acceptance, and again, anybody can jump in and take this one on. The question is, have you noticed an uptick in the acceptance of trans people and the community now versus 5 years ago? And have you noticed areas that in the past were very bigoted now being open to trans people? Do you think it's based on their minds being more open, or do you think they're more accepting because because of the fear of being outed as a bigot? So do we feel like there's in some areas more acceptance? Like we see a lot of these areas where there is a rise in bigotry and there is a rise in attacks. But does anybody see? And one thing I can say, like in New York City, in academia, I would say today it's probably more acceptable to come out as a trans person. Like that, again, not like this is a very generalized, and there's so much transphobia within the academia that it's like a very general question, but there is some kind of, I guess, possibilities. But does anybody have thoughts on this?
I can jump in. I have a couple of thoughts. I love this question too, because I think it's important for us to, again, be clear about what is really happening. And the way that I see things, I mean, there's a number of things. On the one hand, I'll speak just from the perspective of being a TV writer. There's been a lot of changes. There's way more trans and non-binary people who are in the Writers Guild, which is the union for TV and film writers, screenwriters. And actually, this past week, we actually had the first, like they just created like a trans and non-binary committee. Because you have different committees. There's like a Black committee, a Latinx committee, Asian American, so on. And even within the LGBTQ plus committee, there's now a new committee for trans and non-binary writers, which is exciting because, again, this is about building institutional power. Storytelling is so powerful. And obviously, we all watch TV, we all watch film. And to know that there's more people, not only in front of the camera, right, the visibility part, but there also needs to be institutional change as far as people who are behind the camera who can actually make the stories that we want to see. If you want to know why so much trans representation on TV is awful, which it is, a lot of it is so cringy and terrible and still not where it needs to be. It's because there aren't enough of us who are at those higher positions who can actually make that change possible. So for me, to know that I'm at least in a cohort of people, many of us lower level writers who are climbing up the ranks, because ultimately that's what one has to do in this business is, pay your dues, get on TV shows, learn the craft, learn the trade, so that eventually you can get to that level where a network or a studio trusts you with millions of dollars to make the incredible trans or non-binary show that we all need. So on the one hand, I see change happening and it's starting. It's still very small and nowhere near what it needs to be. As Janice said, we've been here forever. Okay. But I also do see certain things starting to change. Now, the other side of this is the performance side, which to me is, I'm so glad you said this, Yasmina, because this is something I see way too much. Where because now we have spoken up, we've made it very clear, we all see the writing on the walls, right? Like especially with the radical right, they make it very clear they do not want us to exist. You know, when I thought about my book coming out, I was like, well, at first I saw DeSantis and I thought, oh, I guess my book will be banned in Florida. Wonder what that means. And it was funny too, because I go to the LGBTQ plus archivist meetup at the center on 13th Street. And, you know, I was telling people this and they were like, Sid, that's an honor. What an honor. And I was like, okay. But then after the CPAC clip went viral, I said, wow, well, I need metal detectors if I ever do a Q&A about my book, about this history, about my story, you know, which is the flip side of visibility. Not only are we a target, right, in very specific ways, but then I also want to even extend that conversation to what the point was that you raised, Yasmin, that I thought was so interesting, of like the performative allyship, which are they say that they're pro-trans, or, oh, I know a trans person. Or if you work in Hollywood, the best I love to see, or I really don't, there's so many showrunners who all have a trans son. That's like the new hot thing. It's like the Telfar bag of Hollywood, is to have a trans son. And they all want to speak for us as if they know anything about our experience, which they don't. And, you know, it's something that keeps coming up of like, you know, it's the gay guys who got the executive position and now they want to, you know, see themselves as the trans whisperer instead of actually allowing a trans or non-binary person to have that position. So to my original point that I was making earlier, it is important for us to take up space in these institutions because they are fundamentally flawed. None of them were made with any of us in mind, right? So whether that's you getting into politics, you getting into the arts, you getting into academia, whatever it is, obviously I think about this a lot for myself. My ticket was paid for. It was paid for by all of those ancestors and transcestors who are not here, who lived very difficult lives where they couldn't even make it to 34, or they couldn't make it to see their name on a TV show, or to get a book deal, or to do any of the stuff that I'm doing. I never take it for granted. But that also means that we need to open the doors for other people coming behind us. We also need to call on those cis allies and to not only to know the difference between when it's time to be an ally, an accomplice, or an advocate, okay? And this is, I think, where people really get messed up with this term ally, because they think, oh, my affiliation entitles me to this. You know, I look at them like those white people who are adopting little black kids 20 years ago when that was trending, right? Would that white person ever be like, oh, I know what the black experience is? No. So if you're a cis person, and just because you either dated a trans person, or, you know, hung out with the girls back in the day, or whatever the hell it is, it does not mean you're entitled to speak about or understand my experience or any of my sisters, siblings, or brothers' experiences. It is time for you to listen. Listening is a skill, truly. You know, and I think that it's important for those folks to actually hear us and hear what we need, right? It's like, if you want to show up for us, really show up. Don't do this nonsense of like, oh, you know, I know better for you. Because the other side of the patriarchy that I see showing up in our communities oftentimes with these quote unquote allies is a patronizing attitude, which is still patriarchal. Okay, you may think you're an ally, but if you aren't actually listening, or if you aren't actually stepping aside when it's not your time to talk, what are you doing? You know, you're not really here for us. And unfortunately, I see this way too much. So it's important for us not only to build with the power and abilities that we have, but it's also important for us to call those things in and to really take up space where we need to be.
Thank you. Does anybody want to respond, add? And I wonder, I guess, Shah, I think I'm actually curious because I think you work in a lot of the sort of like influencing the politicians who may or may not do some of this performative, and this is not asking you to call I'm not asking you to name names, like this is not that at all, but do you encounter sometimes something, or Mateo, like I feel like the two of you work a lot with, with possibly people who might be doing some of this performative allyship. I mean, I guess we all probably do, but um,
Yeah, I mean, I think Mateo and I definitely do. I see it often. I hear it often, and I think what's worse is that oftentimes I'm the only Black, Indigenous, trans, non-binary, femme-identified person in these spaces. And I think when we have days such as Trans Day of Visibility or Trans Week of Visibility, it becomes a spectacle. It becomes a piece of theater almost, where buildings are lit up in pink, white, and blue. The governor releases a video, as she did today. Elected officials post tweets of solidarity with the trans flag emoji. And I go back to what I said earlier. Where does any of this lead us to equity? Where does any of this lead to advanced civil rights protections, advanced rights, advanced ability to survive? People can say what they want. They can issue proclamations. They can give awards to people who have more visible platforms. But what is that doing to the homeless youth, the thousands of homeless youth on 125th Street? What is that doing to the sex worker who has experienced incarceration, or who doesn't have a place to lay their head at night, or who doesn't have enough money in their pocket to feed themselves? And so when I hear elected officials and our representatives and so-called leaders at the forefront of our civil rights movement talking about solidarity, I think solidarity comes with action. Solidarity comes with an investment. It comes with equitable investments. It comes with leadership opportunities. It comes with mentorship opportunities. It comes with pathways to success. Other than that, it's just talk. And I'll give a very clear example. Last year, New Pride Agenda championed, hard fought, hard won the TGNC NBI Ledena Bolhas Trans Wellness and Equity Fund, an unprecedented victory for New York State, a $3 million investment by the New York State Legislature and the governor to advance the equity in social resources, services, and leadership capacity of trans people across the state. This year, we are trying to expand that fund equitably. Just as last year, in their one house budget, the New York State Assembly did not put up any money. The Senate put up $1 million and the governor ended up putting up $2 million. Here we are in the second year. The New York State Assembly put up no money. The New York State Senate put up $1 million just as they did last year, and the governor put up $2 million just as she did last year. Where is the equity in that? Where is the equity when we have hundreds of millions of dollars being put into other social issues for other groups who are experiencing poverty or disenfranchisement? When it comes to the trans community, we are always at the bottom of the barrel. Funders for LGBTQ issues reports that out of every $100 spent on LGBTQ issues, only 4 cents trickles down to anything related to trans services or resources. Out of a $227 billion budget, $15 million would only be 0.01% of the state's budget, right? And here we are in the second year at $3 million a day before the state's budget is supposed to be enacted, literally fighting, begging our elected officials for pennies to the dollar. And It's Trans Day of Visibility, and everyone and their mother is posting on social media, releasing videos, using the trans flag icon, talking about, we stand in solidarity with you, we support you, right? But has the Safe Havens for Trans Youth and Families bill been passed? No. They're waiting until Pride Month, but you would think that the state legislature would have an appetite to pass it during Trans Week of Visibility of all weeks. But they're going to wait until Pride Month to do it, just as the governor waited until Pride Month last month to sign the Lorena Borjas Trans Wellness and Equity Fund instead of signing it when the budget was enacted. They wait until moments of opportunity to increase their polling, to say that they did something, just to say that they did something. But here we are. Connecticut, Massachusetts, I think Illinois, there are several states across the country, California, who have already made their states, who have already passed laws making their state a safe haven for trans youth and families. In New York, the nation's frontline defense, the state closest to the southern region, we're dragging our feet. Here we are at Trans Day of Visibility, and we still haven't even been able to double the fund that was created last year to advance equity for trans New Yorkers. When we know that there is a massive arrival of trans youth and their families fleeing persecution. So there is a lot at stake. There is a lot more to be done here in New York State, especially when people like Michael Knowles, who called for the eradication of trans people, are being invited to the governor's backyard in Buffalo to speak at the University of Buffalo. There is so much more work to be done here in New York, and there are tangible policy solutions and equitable investments that our lawmakers, that our elected representatives can be doing today, yesterday, all throughout this week to better our lives, to increase our safety, to make resources more accessible to us and trans youth and their families who are going to call New York home, and for generations of trans people who have historically called New York home, but they're sitting on their hands, they're dragging their feet, and they're posting, tweeting, and running up their likes on social media. So take that for what you will, but I don't see the leadership in that.
I just want to say, Sheer is an incredible speaker. I always say it, and it's yeah, I don't even know why I'm going after them now. But yeah, I think one question that came to my mind is like acceptance from who, right? Like if it's like politicians, like getting acceptance from politicians to try to pass like legislation. Yeah, most of that is performative. There are like queer politicians who are like, oh, can you let us know tomorrow if this platform looks good to you? And it's like, you've had years to engage your community members, and you're giving, like organizers 1 day to respond whether a platform is good enough for trans people. Politicians who are trying to pass a bill to create a group to talk about X, Y, and Z, when in reality that bill holds no power, but it looks good for them. There's a lot of that, like kind of performative solidarity. I like to think about acceptance, and this is just like more on like a micro level, but so one of the things that I like to think about is how do we build communities that not only think about acceptance but camaraderie. Here in Jackson Heights is a Latinx community, primarily Spanish speaking community, where at night, well, throughout the day, but primarily at night, our trans communities are very loud and proud in the streets. There is a lot high levels of violence in our own community, but I like to think about how can we support our community to change that and to unlearn that transphobia, to build together. And that goes back to what Janice was saying earlier and Jennifer was saying earlier, like, how do we come together to really fight against all these like systems that have oppressed and pushed down our communities? And I give an example, like here in Make the Road, I've been at the org for a minute, like 10 years. And in the very beginning, like pronouns were not a thing, gender neutral bathrooms were not a thing. HR didn't know how to navigate people's identities. Healthcare was like completely different, of what was able to be offered. And I think throughout time we were able to like change. We have now been able to like create a better environment. But what I care the most about is community members showing up at marches, at events, at trans-led community spaces in solidarity. So every year we have the Trans Latina March, and like 15 years ago, sorry, 11 years ago, we started with like 50 people, very small. Nowadays, in July, when we do the Trans Latina March, it's like 500, 600 folks. And then what's the most beautiful thing about those marches is that families, parents come with their kids to come and march with us because they are in solidarity with our experiences. Because when we have like meetings and Make the Road and talk about what does housing look like, what does workers' right look like, what do we think about leadership, we do it all as a collective, and trans folks are elevated in those spaces. And so they come with their kids and, they grab chalk and they write on the floor like trans power, or they write love, or they draw little hearts all over, because we like to shock up the entire like plaza. And that to me is the most important form of acceptance and camaraderie. Like seeing like, my elders like being loving to my people, like having my mom in that space, like also educating on other parents and also like helping them arrive to where she's at the moment. And I think, I think there are, if throughout, like in media, in TV, or in politics, in many different places, there has been like an increase of acceptance. What matters to me the most is that we're building acceptance and camaraderie in my neighborhood so that we can go outside without the fear of facing violence. I don't know. And I have so many thoughts, and I'm sorry I'm so scattered. But I going back to the politics side, like if there is so-sad acceptance, it needs to come with that equity that Chiro was talking about. I think one of the things that has been really hard for us here at Make the Road is like we have community members who are sex workers who are aging, and in New York City, there's a program called HASA to provide housing, permanent housing for folks who are HIV positive. Many of the elder trans folks in this space who are sex workers are choosing to become HIV positive so they can have access to this permanent housing program. And I think what is hard is, I respect their agency, completely understandable. It is their choice, it is their body. But what is hard and upsetting is that the system has forced that decision so that they're able to have a place to sleep at night. And I think if we see many more trans and queer elected officials to come on board, or with those views of solidarity with trans folks, it is not translated to my community. It has not been. This is New York State is the most progressive it's ever been, and still, it's awful for my folks. We are in TV. We are, and I will say this, and I love this because there is a climbing show on HBO. I'm a climber, of course. I'll say this, and the athlete that won is a trans man. His name is Kat. Big fan, and that's exciting. It's beautiful to see that because I'm like, oh my god, that's possible. But when I have to go back to like, I need to call a member just to make sure that, like she's recovering, or I need to call a member to see if I still can get her the stipend to cover some sort of the bills because she just faced violence last week and is unable to do some work. And I think that to me, that contrast hurts. And we had our trans visibility health fair earlier, and one of my best friends came to visit, and I grieve a lot in this work. Oh, sorry, I didn't think I was gonna feel it, but I grieve hard in this work because New York is the most progressive. We talk about acceptance, we talk about clinics. But Melissa was killed. My people at the very first 2 weeks of the pandemic here in Jackson Heights, 8 of our folks, trans women, died right away. I think to me it's like when we're building, when we are thinking about acceptance, it needs to translate to safety. And that's why when I said like my focus is like, how do we make sure like my community can walk outside without fear of violence or fear of like whether they're going to be able to continue to have a home or to eat or anything. Like, yeah, that acceptance needs to have protections, have to have real teeth. And sorry, I went on a tangent, but like my heart, it's tender. My heart is tender because grief is a big part of the work I do. And no matter how loud we are on TV or in social media, you know, or anywhere else, it still hasn't translated. It still hasn't. I got my top surgery was, I don't know how many years ago, maybe 4 or 5 years. Actually, no, maybe, I don't remember. Well, it's been a minute, but I remember watching Caitlyn Jenner transition on TV in about a week. And I remember having my little piggy bank still saving for my top surgery. And I have been saving for years. And it was hard because to me in that moment, I was like, for who is this space? You know, for who is this acceptance? Who are the people who are accepting and who are they accepting? And I think that was rough. That was hard. I don't know. Now I'm a little sad, but and I'll stop there because then I'm gonna continue to ramble. But yeah, thank you for the space.
Thank you, Mateo. And I just want to echo that this constant mix of pain and loss that can be mixed with, you know, at the same time with joy for our people, right? But then this whole constant threat. And actually, we had a question from the audience that I think sort of links to this personal connection, which is, as a trans individual, what is the central message that you would like to convey to people who are ignorant to reality of being a trans individual in America? And the second part of that is also about advice you would provide for friends and loved ones that are having a hard time living in their truth and how to make them more comfortable. So it's sort of like, I guess, both on what to tell people who seem to be ignorant of what it means, and a lot of the times get sort of like secondhand information, and then people who are families of the trans people who may be supportive, maybe not, maybe they don't know what they're doing. So do you have anything to tell them, to say, any advice, anything you would like them to hear or they should hear? And sometimes cannot hear from people who are close to them. Sometimes people who are close to them are in danger to say something, right? So
I'll jump in on that.
Go ahead.
All right. This actually leverages off the previous discussion. All right. For a long time, the only people that took care of us was us. Right. We've kind of lost that unity as a community. We need to pull it back together. Right. So we're being attacked as a community. We need to pull it together. Right. And that helps to protect the kids and the sex workers and the old people, right? So homelessness, and I work in homelessness. I work in housing. That's my, I get to fight bigots and racists and get paid for it. historically we've had to house ourselves. So you become homeless, you couch surf, you find a friend who's got a spare bedroom, you find some place to stay for a while, you find somebody else. I've done that when I lost my job. But we need to extend that across and make sure that we're actually kind of communicating better with each other, because in a lot of cases we're not. All right, the community's split. Hispanic community has got a set of issues, and it doesn't. We don't wind up inviting Hispanics into different things. The Two-Spirit communities got their own, right? White people do their bit, right? So we need to come together, I think, as a community, because we're under attack, right? And it's been a well-planned attack. So we need to come together, and part of that is actually teaching kids. So we've got a really rich history. Everybody on here could start listing off things from history that we've got as trans people, individuals, and such, but those aren't in books necessarily, right? Caitlyn Jenner gets to write a book, but the rest of us don't, right? Who's the person down the street who did something? All right, who's that? Where's that history on that? We don't teach each other our own history. We don't come together enough to be able to unify to defend off the attack. We need to do that more, and we need to do it in such a way that we protect the kids. We bring the kids up. So we need to make sure that we're putting resources out for kids to learn about us, right? The schools may outlaw it, but it was outlawed when I was a kid, right? So I'd go to the library and I'd find stuff, right? Didn't find a lot, but I found some stuff in the library and I read it. If we get it out, trans people find a way. So we need to come together, and that's part of what we do to help build that community. And when other people see us together and loving each other, they're not going to be hating us as much, right? The better we're in line, the more we'll be able to get a unified message out to people who aren't us and get the allies coming. So that's my bit on it.
Thank you. Sid?
Oh, I was going to say, Yasmina, could you repeat the questions again? Sorry.
Yeah. Well, the question was really, what would be the message to people who are perhaps ignorant to the reality of being trans in America? And then also sometimes that may be the family members of people who are trans. So it's kind of people who either don't know somebody or their only information comes from some kind of media, which and then sometimes it's people who have somebody who's a family member, but they're just not accepting.
Yeah, I would say here a couple things come to mind. One is tune into the conversation from trans folks. I mean, we talked about visibility and platforms and so on. I mean, I'm grateful for people like Raquel Willis, who just does amazing work and shares it with the world. Amara Jones, I think about so many other, I mean, Laverne Cox, today we had even Dominique Jackson. I mean, there's just so many people, Chase Strangio, who are doing the work, Thomas Page McBee, who's a good friend of mine. I mean, I think it's important to read those works. There's a reason why those people fought hard to get into those mainstream institutions. And it was also to be able to disseminate the work to a much larger audience so people can actually understand it or have a way in. I think if you don't know anything, educate yourself. Trans and non-binary folks, like, we're tired. We have to work hard, and sometimes 3 times, 4 times, 20 times more than other folks. And for some reason, I don't know why cis people just think that we all have the time to sit down and explain to them everything without us getting paid. Every time this happens to me, I'm like, should I give you a the W-2 that in order for me to get reimbursed for this? Because yeah, my time is extremely valuable, and how dare you? So yeah, that to me is like a very, very big thing, is we have these platforms for a reason. Two is I would also say to listen. Again, you know, it's about listening, and also being open to things that you do not know. You know, we talk so much about eradicating toxic masculinity. One of the aspects of toxic masculinity we need to eradicate is the idea that you have to know everything, right? Whatever happened to the day of being like, you know what, I actually don't know about that. Tell me more, or say more, or, you know, and I think also for us, you know, people are genuinely coming to you with questions and things. I think it's also, you know, questions that are innocent. Obviously, we know the difference in tone if it's, you know, somebody who's trying to be rude or disrespectful. But I have learned to give people grace, you know, if they are trying and maybe they don't say the right words or the right language, or, you know, maybe they said it in a way that was a little awkward. I mean, I'm always down for, you know, kind of repeating things in the proper language. And again, that's like an educational moment. I do pick and choose my battles about times I feel like educating and times where I'm like exhausted and I'm just like, you know, have a great day. You should Google the, you know, a bunch of things, or go and follow Raquel. She has way more, you know, incredible infographics and info that you should definitely read to educate yourself. So yeah, that's what I say to people who are kind of like new to the topic. And also, again, if it's about taking up institutional space, and you know, obviously is at the forefront of my mind is somebody who is like actively working in a business where we are fighting for turf, so that we can get the shows made and get the things made that actually reflect our society. It's also about passing the mic. If you don't know the topic, if you're not trans or non-binary, seriously, it's a good time for you to stop talking. You know, it's a good time for you to like take a seat and pass the mic to somebody who actually does know and understand. And that's important because, again, that builds our community, that gives us the credit, that gives us the money, the resources that we need, because each one teach one, right? It's the idea that like you pass the baton forward and then we open the door. You know, when I look at like the people who I admire, people like, you know, Issa Rae, or you know, there's so many different like showrunners, you know, Shonda Rhimes is another great example, but you know, these are people who like open the doors for folks, right? Folks who didn't have a seat at the table, you know, and they do that by being a pioneer, tunneling their way into spaces that were never created for them in the first place. And they don't just take the money and run, they tunnel into that space, right? And then they lift other people up with them so that we can all kind of continue to do the work. So that's how I see that. As far as, I think you had a question earlier about like, what is the message if there is one? I mean, trans folks, we're just like everybody else. You know, whoever knew that book, Everybody Poops, would be like, you know, one of the most important books of our time, truly, because we bleed, we cry, we have mental health stuff, we don't have mental health stuff, we, you know, go to work, we, I don't know, watch Rihanna at the Super Bowl and have lots of comments about it. I don't know. It's just like we do stuff like everybody else. So we're not asking for, you know, special or extra rights or anything. We're just asking to be treated like human beings, like everybody else. And that shouldn't be so hard. I really love, Janice, that you said earlier, you know, again, this idea of like, this is the civil rights issue of our time. You know, when I look at, I have like a huge poster in my apartment in LA of Muhammad Ali, and I have another one of Bruce Lee, and I'm a big fan of Malcolm X. And I just think about how during the civil rights movement, so many of all these people were in conversation with each other, right? They were talking about changing film and TV, right? Especially somebody like Bruce Lee, who really wanted to improve the way Asian Americans or Asian people in general were perceived, and he did that through his artistry in martial arts and in film. I think about how Malcolm X really taught Black people how to actually find ourselves beautiful. You know, Black people at the time didn't even think they were beautiful, and he was like, "No, you are beautiful." And you know, to have that power, and to translate that and to share that with other people is so important. And you know, again, Malcolm X was in conversation with Muhammad Ali, who was changing things in sports, and you know, it goes on and on. I think of all the women who were doing all of the work of the Black Panthers. You know, yes, you had the Huey Newtons and so on, but you know, there was a lot of Black women who were actually doing the day-to-day of making meals and, you know, building action and so on. And just again, all of these people kind of being in conversation with each other to make enormous change. You know, the life that they lived then is, I can't even fathom what that could possibly be. And I've said this, or, you know, I was talking to a writer friend of mine about this, where I just feel like this is kind of where we are with the trans and non-binary movement, is like there's been so much work that has been done in many ways. Obviously, our tickets are paid for, but then obviously there's still so much more work to be done going forth ahead. And even when I look at all the advances for, you know, people of color, Black people in this country, we literally have seen how all these rights are slowly being taken away, whether it's the Voting Rights Act or, you know, obviously Black Lives Matter, and the fact that like police brutality is still claiming lives, right? And it's just like, yeah, we need to figure out some solutions. We need to keep coming at this from all angles, because the way that I see it is literally every institution in this country, in the global north, or whatever you want to call this white European influence part of the world. Yeah, it's all of these institutions are rooted in white supremacy in some way, shape, or form, which means that we all need to have all hands on deck, and not just us, but we also need to ask our brothers, sisters, siblings, allies, advocates, adversaries for help, because that's also how we change it. Because also, it's not that it oppresses us, it oppresses them too. You know, I go back to Janice. I just love the fact, you know, you're like, look, they're coming for drag queens, but then, yeah, they're going to come for everybody's clothes, right? And that also like oppresses cis people, straight people, you know, because they can't even be themselves. They don't even know who they are necessarily. We obviously have to think of those questions from the jump of like, what kind of person do you want to be in the world, right? Because we're already told that our version of reality, our version of our how we view ourselves is not valid. Well, you know, we flip that question to them too, because they have to think about, well, what kind of society do you want to live in? You know, also, do you feel safe? You know, because we all have seen this kind of play out before in, you know, a variety of like fascist movements and whatnot. So, you know, my message is understand where we are. And, you know, if it's about posterity as well, when your kids ask you, okay, when the trans folks were being murdered and, you know, people were saying all these hateful things and, you know, children were being destroyed by assault weapons, what did you do? Where were you? You know? I think that's a good question to ask folks.
Thank you, Sid. I think Jennifer was about to also answer. And then I want to say I'm also being mindful of time. We speak of time and everybody's time. So Jennifer, if you want to take also this question, and then I have one more short question at the end, and then we'll share some information about our work, all of us here work. And yeah, so I appreciate everybody's time. Jennifer. And I just love the different backgrounds, Jennifer, love it.
I wanted to specify one thing for any family member that's listening. I know I have to go through it, and I'm pretty sure others will have also, if not will. You hear the phrase, I don't want to lose my child. I don't want to lose my son. I don't want to lose my daughter. Understand, we are still your child. Love us unconditionally. Support us. When some family members sit here and question what's the importance of chosen family, and when you hear the phrase chosen family, you start to sit here and you feel downplayed. Understand that chosen family became that important because they were the loving and nurturing ones to the person that we are. For me, myself, it was a struggle, keep hearing him or hearing my dead name, even well after I had legally changed my name. And I've been her for like 26 years. That's more than half my life. So there is no excuse to say that you still are doing it. You're doing that, then naming it, not because you choose to, and you're so focused. I was so tired of hearing, oh, I don't want to lose. It's not what you want. Respect me, pronoun, and name. If not, you will lose me entirely. Understand, every trans person is not thrown away. Some of us choose to throw away our families because they will not respect us. You want to wake up each day. We already have the world at our throats. The people who are our bloodline, I'm not trying to fight you too. So for that factor, I'd rather just get ahead and leave. I have left. When I first started becoming her, it was my dad had said that he let me finish school. And I was he was about you women's clothing again. Women's clothing again. My mother co-signed. They asked me, do I understand? I was always respectful and I said yes. I went to bed. And maybe like 2 o'clock in the morning, I walked outside. Well, 1:30ish. I walked outside, used the payphone to call someone. I called a friend's father. Sadly, a friend's father, because my own father was making me feel dead. And they sent my friend with the car to come pick me up. I packed like 2 bags and a small duffel bag. And I left. My family didn't see me for like 3 or 4 months. They didn't hear from me for like 3 or 4 months. They found out the area that I had moved to. I was staying with someone sleeping on their couch, but I was much more comfortable because I was finally getting to be me. And I stayed away until they were willing to accept the fact that there is no more boy codes. I've made it, we had to have a talk, and I made it clear to them. I will forego love of a relationship and of my family and of the so-called friends that I gained, as long as I'm able to live comfortably as me. I knew at that moment that was the first phase of self-love. And I was willing to live as me, even if it meant me losing everyone else. That was fine. Because the only person that I truly need in life is me. I can't love you if I don't love myself. And for my fellow trans folks, because I'm about to leave, but for my fellow trans folks, don't rush your transition. Your transition is your transition, just at your transition is your journey. Regardless of what the next person is doing down the block or at the club or on the pier or at the club, baby, you fuck yourself up. I've done damage to my body because I didn't feel pumped enough. And I can never reverse that. Do not rush yourself. And if you are unsure in yourself, it is okay to ask for therapy. It is okay to find an elder to have a conversation. We have so many trans folks who are detransitioning because they transitioned because they were sex workers and they thought having breasts makes more money. They transitioned because all of their other friends transitioned. Get it together. Because you guys are the people that they're using against us. Transition for you. It is not going to be easy. So don't sit here. If this is what you feel, don't sit here and suffer and wait until you're too old or too old to live life and enjoy yourself. While your bones are still kicking and you still got a strut and a twist in your hip, enjoy yourself, or giddy bop in your bop. Enjoy yourself. Live your best life to the fullest as you. Don't do it for anyone else and don't rush yourself. And baby, for all of you guys, well, folks who are in, especially in urban areas, don't let your girlfriends and your friends be sticking you in those damn needles. At least for right now, insurance is taking care of your hormones. Don't go in nobody's apartments, in nobody's alleyway, in nobody's car, or have them come to yours and inject your body with anything other than the doctor. Okay? If you live in a state that's gunning for you, I live in Jersey, but New York is free. I mean, New York can help you out. A lot of people still move to New York to become the women and men or people that they need to be. I'm not telling you to become a New Yorker, but I'm telling you to go to where you don't feel safe at. Greyhound works 24 hours a day. There are people out here on this panel and others. Use social media, use your social media to get the help that you need. Ask questions, become knowledgeable, be comfortable in self, and be the best you. With that being said, I apologize, guys. I have to go. All right.
Thank you, Jennifer. You actually answered my last question. So thank you. So my last question was actually if you all had a message for our youth or people who are just coming to terms with themselves, just coming out, wanting to come out, thinking basically our children, since we're often attacked for taking over the children, right? This is, I think it's important for us to actually think of what I think is our children and their well-being. And so I guess I wanted to kind of, as my last question, and I think it was one of the questions from that I saw in a Q&A, which is basically, do we have any advice? Do you have any suggestion to young children who are now realizing they're trans and or non-binary that you want to share? And it doesn't have to be, because we have about a few more minutes. So it's sort of like share some last thoughts. I don't know who wants to. I feel like Jennifer started off.
I think in the spirits of what Jennifer was saying is like, yeah, reach out. Many of us are happy to, be in community to support either younger folks who are thinking about transitioning or parents who are seeking support for their kids. Reach out. We're here to, extend that loving support. Yeah, and I don't know, like also finding community and however that community looks like. I will say two things. Tomorrow, Cheer is organizing an incredible march. If you're in New York City, come show support, and I let them share more about that. But for everyone who's in New York City, come out and join us. And I forgot my and the second thing is that if you're in New York City and you are someone who identifies as trans, non-binary, or in general, like BIPOC, and you want to climb to reconnect with your body, because climbing helped me get connected to my trans body in very deep ways, holler at me. I would love to take you out. We can go into the mountains, or we can go into the gym, wherever you feel comfortable.
Who wants to join us?
Yes. Advice for those following us. I'll also answer the question that was put up by Emily in the chat at the same time. And that's connect with the community. We're everywhere. I know activists in Tennessee, right? The trans community can connect with the trans community because we take care of us. We don't always do it well. We need to do that better, but we take care of us. So if there's a family or something with a child and you're in the remote nowhere, you are not alone, right? And we got this wonderful internet thing, so you can reach out that way. So we need to form those communities better and make them accessible to people. Children, we need the right people talking to children a lot of times. So we need to make sure that we have parents reaching out if it's all possible. If it's a family, if it's not a family, a lot of times the kids wind up homeless at some point, but we're out here. All right. So all the homeless kids out there, don't be afraid to reach out to us, because we'll get you someplace to stay. Where you don't have to be working on the streets at night or doing something else. that you don't want to be doing at all. That would be my advice to the people living in the middle of places that aren't considered to be safe. I mean, I work with Native communities that are probably more remote and isolated in some of the more conservative parts of the country, and we're welcoming, right? So we're everywhere. Trans people are everywhere. We're not always out everywhere, but we're everywhere.
Sure, Sydney, anything you want to add for our, I feel like Sherry, you're so close to being youth yourself, but you have so much wisdom that.
Yes, I still am a young person. I turned 25 this year. I consider anyone under the age of 25, having advocated for the Raise the Age for Homeless Youth, to provide services to young people beyond the age of 21 to 25. I consider myself a young person. I consider anyone under the age of 30 as a young person. So thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, I would, to trans youth in New York State, in California, in the progressive capitals, and everywhere in between, particularly in the Southern region. I would say we need rights, we need safety, we need equity. You can scroll on Instagram, you can tune into your favorite TV show all you want to, but know that there are those of us on the ground who are speaking up, who are fighting back, who are speaking truth to power, and who are creating tangible, actual, real change to advance your safety, your rights, your equity. I also want to share some amazing trans people who everyone should know about beyond Raquel Willis and Dominique Jackson and Alok, who do the bare minimum. I think those with the biggest platforms that I've seen who, you know, are truly principled and speak on their values are Angelica Ross and India Moore, who share calls to action, who share mutual aid requests, who talk about legislation, who are actively involved in trying to make progress when it comes to social justice issues. I think those are the most visible trans celebrities we have who are doing actual meaningful work. But I think that there are so many more people, and all we've heard are those with big names, with huge followings already. So I want to share people who don't have big followings that everyone should know about. There's Bambi Salcedo, the founder and director of Trans Latina Coalition. There's Cayenne Dorshow, the founder and executive director of Glitz, who secured millions of dollars to provide housing to trans people, to respond to trans people's needs in real time. Lala Zanel, who works at the ACLU, working day in, day out for decades now to advance progressive policies and to create tangible rights for trans people across this country. There's Dominique Morgan, who works on criminalization injustices to end mass incarceration for our community. There's Mariah Moore in New Orleans, who was the first trans person in Louisiana to run for office, who works now at the Transgender Law Center, who's working tirelessly to advance rights and legal protections for our community. There's Joanna Asterbaum in California, who's working to hold the line in another progressive beacon to continue progressing forward, to continue advancing equity in that state, and who helped secure California's $13 million Trans Wellness and Equity Fund. And here in New York, we're begging for $3 million. There is Alex Ramirez in El Paso, Texas, working at the Borderlands Rainbow Center, providing real-time support to queer and trans youth on the border who are in need of services and support. There's Daniela Carter, who's a personal friend of mine who works to uplift our stories and our voices and to provide mentorship and leadership opportunities to young queer and trans people. There are more people than Laverne Cox and Janet Mock and Alok and Raquel Willis, who are doing actual real change work, whose stories deserve to be uplifted, amplified, and supported. And so for anyone looking to see themselves reflected back at you, who need to see a visible representation of someone who is standing up, fighting back, and actually doing real substantive change work, if you're feeling afraid, if you're feeling scared, if you don't know where to turn, I just shared a list of so many trans people across this country who deserve the recognition, who deserve to be uplifted, who deserve your support. Reach out, follow them, and keep in touch.
Thank you. I think Sid, you get to wrap us up, and then we're gonna just share some announcements.
And I'll be very quick. Okay, because I see we have 3 minutes. All right. So first to the youth, a couple things came to mind. Number one, you are enough. Everything you're doing about your transition is enough. And it's beautiful and it's your experience, and you get to decide what that is for you, nobody else. So don't feel guilty if things aren't going as fast as you would like, or if they are maybe going too slow or what have you. Because ultimately it's yours. This is your story and you get to own it, nobody else. Also, to that question, I think somebody had posted in the chat, how can you better support in Tennessee? I think it's about following the conversation. So that means journalists who are covering it, like trans journalists, and there are many of us. It's also about following trans activists on the ground who are doing that work. So I think, again, going back to my point, listening is a skill. It's very, very important that you listen to who is doing what, and then, finding out ways to take action. And then I'll leave on these 2 notes that have kind of been kicking around in my head. Number one, I want to really have a call to action for trans masculine folks to also not be afraid to raise your voices. I think oftentimes in the trans movement discussion, rarely is it ever, when people say trans, do they ever think about us? In a lot of ways, we are invisibilized. Some of it is just the nature of our transition. Masculinity is not commodified and objectified in the same way that femininity is, which is tentative at best as far as being a privilege, I would say. And I would also say, I think it's important that you raise your voice and be visible if you're able to, and if it's safe for you, because also that's another way for people to understand our experience, is especially if people within your community know you, then it's like, oh, wow, you too. Oh, great. Okay, you're somebody I know. There you go. It moves forward the movement, because it's, again, to my larger point, I want to remind us that we need to attack this from all angles. So that means from the macro level, whether we're talking about big politics, these huge legislation, if we're talking about media, if we're talking about arts, culture, but then it also is this local interpersonal level as well. And I would say for all of us, it's important for us to have an abundance mindset. And by that, I mean yes, and, which is, yes, we need people on the local level who are at rock climbing, like Mateo, and you meet them. But we also need those people who are in front of the camera, like that rock climber on that HBO show that I now want to check out, Mateo. You're going to have to send me the link. Or, any of these big stars that we see, or the journalists that we see on the ground or who are doing larger work, the talking heads, the people in sports. I think of all those trans kids who are truly pioneering sports and showing that, hey, this is for everybody. Yet again, we need to have an abundant mindset and say, yes, these folks are doing work, and it also pushes us forward. And that means there's more for us to do, more for the people who come behind us. And we will continue to pass the baton on from our ancestors and transcestors who made our lives possible in the first place. So I just want to call that into action for us to remember that we're in this together and that we need to fight this together 120 bajillion%.
Thank you, Sid. So what I just want to highlight a few events, what's basically tomorrow. Tomorrow. Oh, sorry, tomorrow. Here we go. Here's the slide. And please, if you're able, if you can, come to the rally to victory in support of New Pride Agenda. We're also going to drop some links in chat related to different work done by New Pride Agenda. But tomorrow, Christopher Street Pier, and also please share this on your socials if you are on there. And then also on April 25th in Albany, it's a TGNCNBI Advocacy Day. So it is important that the legislators in Albany hear what we have to say. So I also want to share, Jennifer left, but I wanted to share a couple of links about her projects, Jen Love Project. So which I see it's in the links, and also Black and Pink NYC. Black and Pink is working with folk that are queer and incarcerated, so support. And a couple of CLAGS events I just wanted to highlight in June. As our in June we have our Jose Esteban Munoz Award. Our honoree this year is Miss Major. This will be live streamed, and it's June 9th, I believe. We will have exact time. Just check out, sign up for our mailing list, and we'll let you know, or check out the website for the exact time. And our next event is April 6th, 4 p.m. I believe it's live and live streamed. And it's Queer Trans of Color Conversations with our guest speaker, Nick Flores. Again, all of this you can find on our website, which is clags.org, or you can there is a link that's showing up in chat as I'm speaking. I want to thank our events fellow, Fernando, who's been helping and supplying with all this useful information and links. And yeah, and so at this point, I'm actually going to stop the live stream and recording. But if anybody who is here wants to show up on camera and wave and say hello and just be like, yay, show the love. There's also love being showered in on the YouTube channel. So hi to people who are watching this on YouTube. I see people who are really appreciating what was shared here. And I want to thank you all with full heart. I'm so appreciative of you sharing this time with us today. And thank you so much. But now I'm going to stop sharing. Anybody who wants to say anything, just give me 1 second and then we'll get off YouTube.